Yes, good morning, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Mr. Marko Bislimovski, the President of the ECRB and also the President of the Energy Regulatory Commission of the Republic of North Macedonia, I apologize. He had to go on an urgent meeting with the Prime Minister. I'm Natasha Velyanovska. I'm a commissioner at the Energy Regulatory Commission in the Republic of North Macedonia, and also I'm a member of the ECRB. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to welcome you at this webinar of the 7th benchmarking report on the quality of electricity and gas supply, which was prepared jointly by the Council of the European Energy Regulators and the Energy Community Regulatory Board. The CER has been serving and analyzing the quality of electricity supply since 2001. And covering also the gas supply as of 2016. This ECRB recognized the importance of this activity for well functioning of the energy markets and customer protection, and joined efforts for the CER in 2011 for the first time. While in these previously joint editions, the quality of electricity and gas supply in the energy community contracting parties was analyzed as in form of annex to the main report. This 7th edition offers an improvement as it covers the quality of supply both for the CER and also the ECRB participants in the main body of the report, which enabled easier benchmarking for the most of the Europe. The report compiles data from energy regulatory authorities of 39 of countries and provides findings and recommendations to maintain a good quality of all dimensions of electricity and gas supply for the customers across Europe. This report addresses 3 major aspects of the quality of supply. For the electricity, these are continuity of supply, voltage quality, and commercial quality. For the gas, these aspects are the availability and the technical characteristic of the grid, which is the technical operation quality, its chemical composition, natural gas quality, as well as the commercial quality. Having in mind that the safeguarding the stable and undisrupted electricity and gas supply for energy customers is a central focus of the regulatory activities, this report also tackles the importance of quality of supply regulation and proposes improvements in this respect. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to use this opportunity to thank the CER Distribution System Working Group, actually the Energy Quality of Supply Workstream, as well as the ECRB Customer Retail Market Working Group, for the enormous and important work provided in the course of these previous years. Today, we will learn more about the report's findings and recommendations from the main CER authors, which are Mr. Ognen Radovic and Mr. Michael Westerman. But also, I would like to express my gratitude to the ECRB main contributors, Edin Zametica, Ms. Anastasia Stefanovska-Angelovski, Mr. Nikola Dubajic, and Mr. Rodion Koval. With this, I would like to conclude the introductory remarks and to invite you all to stay committed to the protecting European energy customers. Thank you for your attention, and now I will give the floor to the Vice Chair of the CER Distribution System Working Group, which is Mr. Frédéric Marissier. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, before getting to the heart of the matter, I would like to say a few words, and first of all, thank again the drafter for the quality of their works. One should never underestimate the difficulties of such an endeavor. Indeed, regulation frameworks are a bit like gastronomy. Every chef has its own recipe and sometimes its own way of defining and preparing the ingredients. So it takes a lot of work and dedication to understand and honestly evaluate the effectiveness of regulatory practices, considering the specific conditions and objectives for which they were designed. Their work identifies best practices, and proposes actionable recommendations that will help us continuously improve the quality of supply. And as we look to address the challenges facing the energy sector, it is clear that collaboration and experience sharing is paramount. We all agree that the provision of a reliable and efficient energy supply is a key driver of economic growth and quality of life. And as you'll see in details through the report, excepting for exceptional events, most countries manage to maintain, if not decrease, the duration and the number of unplanned interruptions. And many countries reported that improved continuity of supply occurs when incentive schemes are implemented. Therefore, I have no doubt that you will find this report useful for your work. I must mention that this is the first event in a series of 2 webinars. The second being more focused on stakeholders' questions and comments. The precise time and date are not known yet, but I do not take many risks by saying that will be held somewhere before the summer break. So this project was remarkably led by Ogen Radovic from E-Control, the Austrian regulator, and Michael Westermann from Benetza, the German regulator, who are the CEER Energy Quality of Supply Workstream co-chairs. But before handing over to Ogen, let me thank the other authors, the other CEER authors, namely Camila Abaken, Antonio Candela Martinez, Rakhil Aker Nordeng, and Marco Poljak. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your names. So now the floor is yours, Ogen. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. Let's see if I can control the slides. Yes, I can. Good. Then let's get started. We made these slides. No, actually, let me introduce myself first. Ognjen Radovic, I work for Austrian NRA, E-Control. I have co-led the energy quality of supply workstream since 2016, since the 6th benchmarking report, and I still have the same position. Michael and I led this gigantic project that we're going to present today. So the slides that we made were made before we knew what ECRB representatives were going to say. So there's some overlap in the introduction, and I don't want to repeat the same thing. I'll go over them, skip some things. But as we said, for over 2 decades now, CEER has been analyzing data in European countries in electricity, and since 2016 in gas, and these are presented in benchmarking reports, which have in those 20 plus years gained importance and acknowledgement across Europe. Just as a comparison, the first benchmarking report from 2001 had only 6 participants: Italy, Spain, Portugal, Norway, the Netherlands, and Great Britain. And then on the right side, you can see the map of the countries participating in this 7th benchmarking report. On the top, it's electricity. On the bottom, it's gas. It's nearly the entire continent. It's 39 countries altogether, 39 blue countries in the main body of the report. In addition to that, there are 3 yellow countries from MedReg, which we also included in an annex in fact sheets. Those are Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan in electricity, and only Turkey in gas. We were hoping for more, but that's what we got. Maybe next time we'll hear from more better countries and continue the cooperation. This was already covered for the first time. It's CEER and ECRB working together. As was stated before, since 2011, meaning since the 5th benchmarking report, ECRB countries were also included, but at that time, it was in an annex in the 5th and the 6th report, and now it's in the main body because we thought that was the only way to offer good overview and good comparison of the entire continent. People usually ask me how often these reports get published, and they expect me to give them a number of years that pass between 2 reports, such as 2 or 3, and I always tell them every once in a while, and you can see why. They were published in 2001, 3, 5, 8, 11, and 16, and the new one in 2022. So there is no pattern. It really is every once in a while. time permitting, resources permitting. After the 5th and the 6th benchmarking report, there were short updates published in 2014, 15, and 18, and those focused only on the continuity of supply. And I know that there will be an update after the 7th benchmarking report, probably published next year. We started working on this in 2019. We made a questionnaire that we sent out in 2019 and gathered data by the end of that year. And in early 2020, we started working, and we were actually planning to publish it by the end of 2020. So we had a meeting the first week of March of 2020. And then the week after that, there was the first lockdown in Europe and the pandemic started. And I haven't been to Brussels since, and I haven't seen the group since in person. That made it difficult without physical meetings. Communication is not the same as if you sit in the same room and draft together and exchange ideas together. Another reason for the 2-year delay was that the number of drafters was a single digits working on what ended up being a 300-page report. So it is an enormous task, and that was also difficult, and all of us have other things to do at our job. This is not the priority. This is just done on a voluntary basis. So anyway, the report was finished in the first half of 2022, then it was approved, and then we had to check everything again and send hundreds of emails to all the countries in Europe and check if everything was okay and do the proofreading and formatting. And after all that, it was published on December 22nd, 2022, so just a few days before Christmas. As was stated before, there are 3 main aspects of the quality of supply, 3 in electricity and 3 in gas, and these are the main chapters in the report, and this is what we're going to present to you today. I think we've heard this, so I don't think we need to repeat it. Sorry about that. Somebody's drilling something right next to me. I hope you can still hear me. I have a microphone, so I hope it's okay. As stated before, continuity of supply means the availability of electricity and gas. Voltage quality is the technical quality of voltage, and also gas quality is the chemical composition of gas, and then commercial quality has to do with the way the customers deal with their, most of the time, DSOs, sometimes also suppliers. So here we go now. Continuity of supply, the first and the longest chapter in the report. It concerns interruptions in electricity of supplies, and those are always described with indicators that illustrate either the number of interruptions or their duration or energy not supplied in a year. As stated before, we started working on this in 2019, so that is the reason the data covers the period from 2010 to 2018. Because that was the last full year that the data was available for before we started collecting it. Since not every country participated in every chapter and answered every question, we are going to tell you how many countries participated in what chapter. 38 in this one, so it is the largest chapter by any metric. Interruptions can be divided into, well, there's a few different ways of classifying them, whether they're planned or unplanned. Planned interruptions means if the network users are informed in advance. They're still drilling. I really apologize. I had no idea this was going to happen. I hope you can hear me. How long the customers are informed in advance depends on the country. Everybody has different rules, and that varies between 24 hours and 30 days. The second classification is whether they're long or short. What you see on screen is the most common definition, but that is not applied in every country. Typically, 3 minutes is the limit between long and short interruptions, but there are also exceptions to that. I think in Georgia, it is 5 minutes. In Albania, it is 10. Then there are different cases, countries like the Netherlands and Denmark, where there is no distinction between long and short interruptions. There's just an interruption. In the Netherlands, any power outage longer than 5 seconds is considered an interruption. In Denmark, it is 1 minute. And then a final classification is those that include exceptional events and those that do not. An exceptional event well, it's difficult to classify because there's a different definition in every country, but you could say that it is an event that could not reasonably be prevented by a DSO or a TSO. And they can be natural, such as strong winds or very strong winds, snowstorms, floods, earthquakes, or non-natural as wars, as we have in Ukraine now, sabotage, embargoes, and interestingly, I've seen a few countries where blackouts were also listed as a non-natural cause. So that is an interesting concept, meaning a cause of one interruption is another interruption. But that's the way it is in some countries. The two most commonly used indicators are called CEER and CEFI. The first one has to do with minutes, meaning duration, an average amount of time per year that the supply is interrupted, expressed in minutes per customer per year. The second one is the number of interruptions on average, interruptions per customer per year. There are so many indicators used that we cannot list all of them here. I just listed two more. AIT is the average interruption time, the amount of time that the supply is interrupted. There's ENS, energy not supply, which is a hypothetical value. It's a total amount of energy that would have been supplied to customers had there been no interruptions, but that involves a lot of guessing because you don't know what that amount would be. Other indicators would be, for example, MIFI, which is the same as CEFI, but for short interruptions. There's different weighting. There's ACIDI and ACIFI, which are the same as CEER and CEFI, but they are weighted by the connected capacity rather than the number of customers. Spain uses TAP and NIEPI, which is similar, also weighted by the connected capacity. Portugal uses NIEPI too, I believe. Sweden has an indicators with a share of customers experiencing multiple interruptions a year, and so on and so on. If you're interested, you can look at a report. They're all listed there. The main findings of this chapter is that continuity of supply in electricity is monitored in all countries, but there are differences in the types of interruptions monitored and the indicators used. Like I said, there are many, and the way they're calculated, the weighting method, and the voltage levels included in them. And that is something that is incredibly important. There is a table in the reports, table 2.1, I believe, where all voltage definitions are listed. So first of all, you should look at another table in the report which explains which voltage levels are included in which indicators in which country, and then what those voltage levels mean. There is no standardized definition, unfortunately. It is what it is. So keep that in mind when comparing values. But what we can tell you is that indicators or interruptions, originated on high voltage are monitored everywhere. Interruptions originating on medium voltage are monitored in every country where that voltage level is defined, which is all of them except Great Britain and Slovakia. They do not have definitions of a definition of medium voltage. For low voltage level, it is all of them except Malta and Slovenia, if I remember correctly, and extra high voltage is less, but that is not defined in every country, that voltage level, I mean. Unplanned interruptions are monitored in every country. Planned interruptions aren't, and the monitoring usually covers long interruptions, whatever that means. As I said before, there are different definitions, but most of the time it means that it's longer than 3 minutes. Well, let's look at the numbers. As we heard from ECRB and as we heard from the vice chair of the TS working group, the majority of countries either decreased or at least maintained their unplanned minute loss and unplanned number of interruptions per customer during this observed period, which is 2010 to 2018. And below you can see the values and the vast differences. Unplanned CEER, which means the minutes per customer per year, varies between 9 and nearly 5,000 minutes. That is a significant difference. The same goes for CEFI. It goes from 0.2 to over 55. And I have to, just in case somebody doesn't know, the number of interruptions that does not have to be a whole number, since you have to divide the number of affected customers by the number, by the total number of customers. As soon as you have division in fractions, it is no longer a whole number. So yes, you can have on average not a whole number of interruptions per year. Regarding planned interruptions, it is the same 0.23 to over 5,000 minutes for SID, and 0.00, which is actually not 0.00. We used only 2 decimal points in the report, but we explained in the report that this is 0.0015 rounded down with 2 decimal points to 0.00. That was Portugal in 2017 and 2018. So from nearly 0 to over 45, vast differences in every major indicator. The second half of this chapter has to do with incentive regimes. There are 2 types of incentive regimes implemented to, again, maintain or improve continuity of supply. They can be on system level, meaning it deals with DSOs and TSOs, or on customer level. 19 countries indicated that they employ incentive regimes at a system level, most of the time in distribution, but sometimes in transmission, and most of those use a combination of reports and penalties, sometimes only penalties, but interestingly, no country reported using only rewards in their incentive schemes. Regarding incentive schemes on customer level, that is in place in 2/3 of the countries, and what that means is that a customer gets compensation if a single interruption is too long, or if the total duration of all interruptions in a year is too long, or if the total number of interruptions in a year is too high, meaning it exceeds certain limits. And that compensation can be either automatic or on customer request. In 14 countries, it is automatic. Finally, the recommendations of this chapter. We recommend including all incidents at all voltage levels in interruption statistics. As I said, not every voltage level is included in every indicator. We would like to see that happen someday, if possible. It would improve comparability of indicators. We would also like to see them harmonized, establish the definition of exceptional events in each country, because it doesn't exist in each country. And then once established, we think that they should also be harmonized, because since DSOs and TSOs cannot really do much to combat exceptional events, then most of the time people use the values for SID and SIFI without exceptional events, meaning you would use all of the interruptions and then subtract what is considered to be caused by an exceptional event. But what you subtract is different in each country, and we would like to see that standardized. We also recommend applying adequate incentive schemes if viable, both in distribution and in transmission, and compensation payments. Obviously, those are not available in every country. We said 2/3 of the countries. We would like to see them everywhere, especially for network users affected by very long interruptions. Now, what very long interruptions might mean, that is up to discussion. And I'm sure that if it comes to that, every country would have a different definition of a very long interruption. That's it for that chapter. That was the longest chapter in the report, a 100-page chapter. The third of the report was just that. So let's move on to voltage quality now. I've seen the list of the participants. I've seen their names, but I'm going to assume that not everybody's an electrical engineer. I know that they aren't. I'm going to try to be clear and concise because this is technically the most complex part of the report. It has to do with deviations from optimum values of magnitude and waveform. For non-engineers, if you've ever seen the sine wave, how the voltage goes and cycles 50 times a second in Europe, there's prescriptions for magnitude and allowed deviations. So this is where the voltage quality is. It's basically deals with all disturbances in voltage except interruptions that we just covered. A few examples of those disturbances, it can be the supply voltage variations, meaning whether the voltage is too high or too low. Voltage dips, that means when a voltage gets too low for a short time, mostly due to a large load being switched on, for example, or short circuits in a grid. Voltage swells, that is the opposite. If the voltage gets too high, mostly if a large load gets turned off. There are things like flicker, and that is a voltage fluctuation, a rapid voltage fluctuation. There's harmonic voltage having to do with harmonics, which are multiples of the 50 hertz or 50 cycle per second frequency. So the second harmonic is 100 times per second, the third is 150 times per second, and so on and so on. There are formulas to calculate this, and I don't want to make it too complicated. I don't want to lose half of the audience who are not engineers. Everyone connected to the grid, whether they are a producer or a consumer, could influence the quality of the voltage. And this is becoming an increasingly important issue because there is a susceptibility of end user equipment and also of industrial installations. If you look at the electronics and what people have at home nowadays, it is different from what they had 30, 40, 50 years ago. Everybody has electronic gadgets nowadays, multiple cell phones and multiple tablets per family and multiple laptops, and so many gadgets with what's called a switch mode power supply, which can be affected by low quality of voltage, and it could also affect the grid. This should be looked into in more detail, and it may be an increasing problem in the future. There is also distributed generation increasingly. Nowadays, a lot of people living in a house have photovoltaic panels on their roof. So the regulation of voltage quality means setting standards and minimum requirements for voltage quality. Rewards and penalties could also be implemented, the same as in continuity of supply. Obligations could be set and published. Those are just some ideas on how to regulate it. This aspect of the quality of supply was not analyzed in the first two editions of the report in 2001 and 2003. The third report from 2005 was the first one to analyze voltage quality. 34 countries participated in this chapter. As I said, we'll tell you in every chapter how many countries we had. EN 5160 is a European standard that gives an overview of all voltage quality disturbances and sets limits for many of them. And this standard is used, applied in many countries. And that is, I think it's a good thing because it ensures a harmonized understanding of voltage quality phenomena throughout Europe. But there are also countries that said 5160 is simply not enough. We want to be even more strict and give our customers an even better voltage quality. So an example of that would be what you get at home, 230 volts out of the socket. The EN 5160 says that 95% of the time that has to be within plus or minus 10% of 230 volts, or 100% of the time that has to be within plus 10 and minus 15%. But there are countries that said that that's not enough. We want it to be within 10%, 100% of the time. And the same goes for medium voltage when there might be some sensitive installations. According to EN 5160, in medium voltage, I think 100% of the time it has to be within 15% of the agreed voltage. And I remember seeing a few countries where it's within 10%, and France specifically stated that it has to be within 5% of the nominal voltage 100% of the time. So that is significantly stricter than EN 5160, which again is good, meaning better quality of voltage. The analysis revealed that the voltage quality is monitored in 24 responding countries, either transmission or distribution grid, most of the time both of them. But indicators that are monitored differ between them. Again, we use indicators even for this. Supply voltage variations, which I described, that is the most monitored voltage quality indicator. Most of the countries indicated that the DSOs are obligated to measure voltage quality on request from end users, and then typically, if it turns out the voltage quality is not okay, then the customer would not have to pay anything. But if it turns out that the voltage quality was okay, then the customer would have to pay for voltage quality monitoring and measuring. Most countries indicated that they have requirements for smart meters. That has been a very significant topic for at least 10 years now, maybe even longer. Smart meters can be used to monitor voltage quality too, but there are vast differences in penetration rates from very high, nearly 100% in countries like Spain, Italy, Norway, Finland, to countries that have, well, close to zero penetration rate. And finally, in some countries, end users are subjected to compensation or a lower tariff if the standard for voltage quality is not met. The recommendations, I've covered some of them already. Since very few people know about this or even care about this, we recommend educating customers what voltage quality is and what it means and how it can affect them in their equipment and how they themselves can affect the grid. It would also be good if the end users were informed of the voltage quality, either if they requested or if they visited the website of their DSO. Maybe they could be published in every DSO's website. With increased distributed generation and smart meter penetration, it is important to research how that affects voltage quality, how smart meters could be used for monitoring the voltage quality, and how voltage quality is influenced by distributed generation and prosumers, meaning network users that both consume and generate electricity. That's it for this chapter. I hope I was clear enough. I understand that it's very technical. Well, we now move on to the last electricity chapter. It is commercial quality. There's a lot of similarities between electricity and gas. It is, well, basically the same, but we still decided to present it separately, which is the way we have it in the report. Commercial quality is associated with transactions between customers and the companies, meaning DSOs and TSOs, and also suppliers, but most of the time DSOs. What that means that it is the speed and accuracy with which customer requests are handled, requests or questions. And there are two types of those transactions, either a pre-contract transaction, meaning before you become a customer of that DSO, such as information on connection to the network, and then once you are their customer, questions and information about billing and payments, and most of the time responses to customer questions and inquiries and complaints. In this chapter, we had 34 countries too, like in the previous one. So we use indicators again in this chapter. I did not want anybody to think this is too easy, so other than indicators, we also have standards in this chapter. And the difference is shown below in the image on the bottom of the slide. An indicator is what is on the left. It is a way to measure a dimension of service quality. In this case, this is just an example. It is the number of responses within 2 business days divided by the total number of responses. So it is a fraction. And then a standard, in this case, says that this number of responses within 2 working days has to be at least 90% in this case. So NRAs could just define indicators without standards, or also define standards for indicators. But I just wanted you to understand what it means when I, at least in this chapter, say standard and when I say an indicator. There are 3 types of indicators in this case, in this chapter. Guaranteed indicators, which means that the customer is guaranteed to get compensated if the quality level is not met. Then there are overall indicators, and that means that for a given set of cases, the quality level must be met. For example, 90% of new customers would have to be connected to the grid within 2 weeks. And in this case, if that doesn't happen, then a DSO would get penalized and would have to pay a fee. Finally, there are other requirements. As the name says, those are additional requirements issued by NRAs to achieve an even better level of quality. And if they're not met, the NRAs could also impose sanctions if they want to. Since there are many things to discuss in this chapter, the way we approached it and the way we approached it in earlier reports was to divide it in certain groups. So in case of electricity, we have 4 main groups of indicators for commercial quality. Connection, which means, for example, the duration of being connected to the grid. Customer care, which is, for example, time to respond to customer complaint or inquiry. Technical service, service. For example, a resolution of a voltage quality problem, which is what we discussed in the previous chapter. And finally, metering and billing. For example, time from the notice to pay until being disconnected from the grid. The main findings of this chapter is that there is an increased focus on the quality of services provided to customers. This is something that's been analyzed since the very beginning, since 2001. So we looked at the previous reports and we noticed that there's a progress in harmonization, and we are very happy to see that. There are 21 different indicators used in Europe. Again, this could mean customers' interactions with even TSO, transmission system operators, or suppliers, but most of the time it means DSOs. We notice that there's a trend to move towards guaranteed indicators, which is also good news. That means the customers must receive compensation. There are exceptions to that, for example, in case of exceptional events that I mentioned in the first chapter. I guess that rule would not apply. Compensation, if warranted, could be automatic or on customer request. In some countries, there's a maximum yearly amount that a customer could receive for non-compliance. Finally, something really interesting. That was on the next slide. The guide drilling knocked me off. Commercial quality is most of the time it has electricity has to do with low voltage customers, meaning the domestic households, because that is the group that needs the most protection. So now we get to the final slide, which is where I thought I was a moment ago. The recommendations in this chapter, CEER and ECRB recommend ensuring greater protection through guaranteed indicators with automatic compensation. If that's not possible, then maybe combining them with overall indicators, which combine guaranteed compensation to customers and also penalties for DSOs not complying with the quality. Automatic compensation is in place in some countries, but not all of them. So we recommend implementing it in every country. And then what I was going to say just a minute ago, something interesting. We noticed that there are countries where indicators consider only written forms of communication. And by that, I mean only letters, not even emails, and especially not phone calls or personal walk-ins. And that does not provide a complete picture of the commercial quality. So we recommend considering all forms of communication, including telephone, and email, and personal walk-ins when calculating indicators to see if a commercial quality is good or maybe less good in a country. That's it. The continued drilling, so I'm going to stop now. That was my final slides. I'm going to give the word to my colleague, Michael, who is going to present gas. So Michael, normally I would say the floor is yours, but there is no floor here. So the screen is yours.
Yes, thank you, Ogi. Yeah, I will present a rough overview about the gas chapters in this report. But first of all, as already mentioned, I'd like to introduce myself. So I'm Michael Westermann, and I'm working for the German regulator, Bundesnetzagentur, and I'm co-chairing this EQS workstream together with Ogi for several years already. And I will go through the gas chapters. So the first one is technical operational quality in gas. And this chapter covers first of all the structure of the gas networks across the reporting countries, and then we show which continuities of supply indicators are provided in these countries, and we present an overview of regulation in force. We're dealing with continuity of supply and safety. And overall, we got answers from 30 countries for these chapters, which are presented in the report then. So in general, we can say that the quality of supply application and regulation for gas does not differ from that in electricity. That means the indicators like SAIDI, RCD, SAIFI are also used for the gas continuity of supply. Also, some countries use different indicators for frequency and duration of an interruption, and some of the reporting countries do distinguish between planned and unplanned interruption. In general, we can say that continuity of supply in the gas networks is really high, which is due to the ability of gas that can be stored. But of course, from the similarities to electricity, the commodity of gas is something very different. We have to say that since gas is a natural resource, the quality of it and the composition is of particular importance, which is covered in the chapter Natural Gas Quality. And of course, technical safety is of much higher importance in the gas networks than in the electricity, since every interruption may give the rise to a physical danger, or it will cost lives, maybe. So for that reason, there are huge efforts to avoid interruptions. So we can see that interruptions in gas networks are much less common than in electricity. But if there is an interruption, we see that they sometimes last longer than in electricity. So, and we observed that an extensive set of gas technical standards and rules have been established internationally. So the main findings in this chapter are as follows. We see that the indicators that are used for describing continuity of supply and technical safety vary between the reporting countries. There is a general availability of information of continuity of supply indicators, but the details are showing very huge differences. So also, since technical safety is very important for the gas sector, we see the usage of other indicators that describe, such as leaks, that describe the technical quality of this infrastructure. Odorization is very important since it improves the safety in the gas network, and it is required in most European countries. So since it is part of the risk management of the network operator, and it is required to detect the presence of gas, so before anything worse happens. So, and for that we can see that in 28 countries, the DSO have at least some obligations regarding gas odorization. The gas storage infrastructure is used but not regulated in so many countries. So we see that 19 of the reporting countries do use storage facilities, but only in 10 of them any regulation is in force. And the same is true in a way for LNG infrastructure, which is used by 10 responding countries by the time of writing the report. Right now, I'm pretty sure it is one country more. and regulation is in force only in 10 of these countries. So what do we recommend in this chapter? It is a bit like before in electricity, that we recommend to expand the coverage of and monitoring of the continuity of supply and safety indicators. So in addition to that, we think that a further harmonization of definition and indicators would be very useful, because it makes a comparison of indicators across countries much more easier and reliable. So we saw in the past, we saw and we did some research about the weighting schemes and the calculation of indicators like CEER or CEER. And just in an example, we saw that the same setting would lead to a very huge differences in the calculated CEER values. So we think that that at least for reporting or benchmarking purposes, a higher grade of harmonization would be very useful. We think that the LNG infrastructure offers a alleged alternative to the common gas supplies via pipelines. And so we think that a further development would be useful, especially more topical than ever. It plays an important role in the EU energy policy. So, but with this recommendation, we only focus on security of supply purposes, and no other aspects are covered with this recommendation. The next chapter in this report deals with the natural gas quality. And in this chapter, we give a summary of the technical parameters and definitions and application of the parameters that describe the commodity gas. So we are only describing the application of the parameters, not for example, the responsibilities of the involved parties like TSO, supplier, or others. In this chapter, we used answers from 28 countries, and maybe some of you would wonder why you wouldn't find answers from Austria or Germany in this chapter. This is because the NRAs in those countries don't monitor the parameters, but we have technical associations in both countries that set binding guidelines and technical rules. So it's not legal a law, but it is very, very strict, and it is legally, more or less legally binding for all participants to follow those rules. But the NRAs don't regulate that. So some of the described parameters in this chapter do represent the chemical composition of gas, and other parameters like Wobbe index or water dew point are describing the important quality of the gas that is delivered between countries. Or we see that the majority of countries is monitoring indicators like the gross calorific value, which is used in 24 countries, the water hydro dew point, it is in 22 countries, and Wobbe index in 22 countries. So I think we can conclude that the Wobbe index is a main indicator for the interchangeability of gases, and it is used to compare the energy output when we are comparing different gas from different countries or origins. We saw already that many countries do rely on the CEN standard, EN 16726, which set different or special rules and limits for indicators of the gas quality. And although country use the standards, they are not legally binding in every country. But using or relying on these standards is a way to reduce the restrictions in cross-border gas flows and might increase the commercial market efficiency. The last chapter in this report deals with gas commercial quality. And as Ogi said already, the chapters are almost the same and of the same structure, and many questions were the same for electricity and gas. But we have to say that it was first covered in the 6th benchmarking report because of that, because before we didn't cover the gas sector at all in the benchmarking report. So analyzing gas commercial quality is quite new to this benchmarking report. And as we already mentioned, it covers the speed and the accuracy with which customer requests are handled. That's a very general definition. It is very similar to the electricity chapter. That means we made distinctions between indicators and standards, and we use the different type of indicators that Ogi already mentioned, the guaranteed indicators, overall indicators, and other requirements. In this chapter, we have answers from 29 countries. And as before, we see that we really have a whole bunch of indicators that can describe commercial quality, and so it makes sense to classify them. And we do this in gas as well as in electricity. So we have, in this case, we have 5 groups of indicators, like for customer care, for grid access, and activation, deactivation, and reactivation of supply, and for metering and invoices. So 5 groups that cover every aspect of commercial quality. So what we see is we don't have, as I mentioned, we don't have a long history of monitoring or analyzing commercial quality in gas. But what we can see is that we have a broad and increasingly harmonized range of commercial quality indicators. Of course, there are differences in concerning the nature and the number of indicators across the countries, and the indicators that are used in every country differ because of maybe political or cultural specificities. So we have the same set of indicators, but they're used in very different combination. Yeah. Then what we can see is that the requirements, the commercial quality requirements that are set by NRAs greatly depend on the customer type or on the company that is involved in the regulation. So we see that requirements differ depending on the customer type or the pressure level or the location of the customers, and many countries set different requirements, for example, for the time limits or the set of indicators in use and depending on the type of company, may it be a TSO or DSO or supplier. But again, what is observed or what we can see is that there is an increased focus on the quality of services provided to customers, and also not only to the on customers, but also on the relationship between DSOs and customers, because this is maybe the main part of commercial quality, and the majority of connections between customers and DSOs are in this part, which makes it extremely important for setting rules. And also we see that we can observe that we have a trend towards using of guaranteed indicators. So that means customer will get a compensation if those indicators are not met. But of course, there's a variation in the use of guaranteed indicators. So compensation might be paid automatically or only on customer requests. The amount of the compensation can be dependent, or can be a fixed value or a fixed value per day. It can be dependent on the customer bills, so the amount of the customer bills or the payment of a service. And as we mentioned, it can be a direct payment to the customer. Other options would be that the amount of compensation might be subtracted from the energy bill. Yeah. And we recommend in the end of this chapter that we would perform a regular review of national regulations. We saw that there's a huge variety of indicators in use in every country. And it is extremely important for making a valid benchmark or comparison that we know that the data is available. So, and it should be promoted that we have a use of a set of identical indicators, and we should examine if there might be additional indicators that should be monitored in the future. And of course, as we heard before in other chapters, we will promote a further harmonization of the indicator definitions, because the reason is the same as before. It makes comparison easier and more reliable. So that is with every cross-country analysis, it is extremely different that we know about differences in different definition, and if we have the possibility to have similar definitions so that we can really compare the outcome. And as Ogi mentioned in the commercial quality chapter as well, it should be the communication ways of customers with the network operators or supplier should be considered in every way. So it is not only a written letter, but customers communicate with phone call, email, online formulas, or by visit in the customer centers. And so it is really important that if we want to monitor the performance of this regulation, that we take into account every field of contact. And of course, it should not only be taken into account the speed of an answer, maybe of a DSO, but also on the quality of the responses. Yeah, that was the part of the gas, and I think we switch over to the clarificatory question and answers, and I already see 2 questions, and if there are no objections, I just would start with the first one. There was a question that we could confirm the new countries that we covered in the report from the MEDREC. And the 3 countries that were Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey that are covered in the appendix. They are a bit different in what they describe. Turkey is quite a long description of their regulatory system, and the other 2 countries are more like a table, a fact sheet in the original name. And then there's another question I saw. How much difference does it make if we would achieve harmonization of indicators? What would be the concrete effect of that? Well, Ogi might add something as well. It is. I will start, and it is a bit difficult to say in the general effect of harmonization. But as I mentioned, we a few years ago we made a short analysis, and we asked the participating countries. We gave them an example of interruptions, a standardized example, and we asked them what would be the outcome of a CEED value and CEFI value in this example. And if I remember correctly, the outcome of the CEED value differs by the factor at least 2. So we have sometimes in some countries the same example would lead to a CEED value that is twice as high as for other countries. So I would say that harmonization of the definitions would make a great effect, maybe not in regulation, but in the comparison. So we can only rely on the results if we know that the object that we are observing is the same.
I think I can expand on that and just give an example. I mean, most people looking at these reports look at the value of not only their countries, but also other countries, and they want to see how their country is doing, if it's better than the average or worse, and there's a lot of comparisons. So I'll give you an example of what non-harmonized indicators can do with continuity of supply, which is something that I guess everybody cares about because everybody cares about having electricity. So imagine this, imagine comparing 2 different countries. And one of them has a CEED, meaning average duration of interruption, of 18 minutes in a year. And the other country has a CEED of 20 minutes in a year. At first sight, you would say, well, the country with only 18 minutes is better, right? Well, no, not always. It depends on what's included in that indicator. So if a country that has only 18 minutes only counts interruptions on medium voltage level, and the other country that has 20 minutes in a year counts interruptions on every voltage level, then maybe that country is better. Because if the first country included all voltage levels in that indicator, the value may not be 18 anymore. It might be 20 or higher than 20. So that's one of the reasons to enable easier comparison for those who want to compare. And I think everybody does that, and that's a way for countries to see how good they are and if there's anything that they can improve. I see there's a new question. Which model of incentive is the most used related to continuity of supply? Oh, wait. There's another question now. Wait, I have to go back. Was most use related to continuity of supply in case of electricity? Off the top of my head, no, I cannot answer that question. I think there were countries that said that if an interruption, as I mentioned before, if an interruption is too long, meaning very long interruptions, then a customer gets compensated. If a total number or duration of interruptions exceed a certain limit, that there are penalties for DSOs or compensation for customers. I think those are the most common ones, but don't quote me on that. Check the report, and I encourage everyone to look at the report. It's free. You can download it on CEER's website. And let's see the other question. EN 5160 is mainly for MT. I think they mean medium voltage, and LT, I guess that means low voltage grids. Do countries also apply for high voltage and extra high voltage grids? Is my understanding of this question. That is a good question. I do not know. I know that there is a table in the report that explains what we call stricter rules by some countries that also apply to high voltage grids. I remember seeing those from Norway and Sweden, I believe, and maybe a few other countries. But that's not EN 5160. Those are just additional constraints that countries impose themselves. But off the top of my head, I do not know if there is a country that applies 5160 for other voltage levels. But like I said, there are countries that have additional requirements. I see no other questions. And that means I can give the words to the chair of the Energy Community Customers and Retail Markets Working Group, Mr. Edin Zametica, who will have some concluding remarks.
Thank you, Ognjen. Actually, I should thanks to all speakers of today's webinar. So thanks to Natasha, thanks to Frederick, thanks to Ognjen, and thanks to Michael. Particularly thanks to our presenters, to Ogi and Michael, who has prepared excellent content, excellent quality presentation on this report on quality. So they are familiar with the word of quality, and that's what they used even for today's presentation. I have to emphasize really great cooperation between Council of European Energy Regulators and Energy Community Regulatory Board in this activity that resulted with a very good report on quality of electricity and gas supply. Today we learned and we become familiar with the content of this report that has more than 300 of pages. We learned about key findings, general remarks, main recommendations of this report. It is also my task to announce another presentation, another webinar which will be dedicated to this report, and that will enable and that will have a longer or bigger time slot for question and answers. And I'm sure that before this next event, all interested stakeholders will become more familiar with the content, and that new questions on this will appear. So I would also like to thanks to all attendees to this webinar. There were more than 100, approximately 100 of participants, many of them from national regulators, but there were also different other stakeholders that were interested in today's topic. So that's all, folks, for today. Many thanks also to staff working in two secretariats, staff working for the Secretariat of Council of European Energy Regulators, and our colleagues, their colleagues working for Energy Community Secretariat, particularly to the ECRB section of this secretariat. So hope to see you all soon before summer break and another event dedicated to the quality of electricity and gas supply. Thanks for all and goodbye.